Good morning, Year 9. I hope you're well and you're looking forward to our reading session this morning. We're going to carry on with The Secret Life of Bees and we're going to pick up from where we left off on page 41. Do follow along as I'm reading and use the ruler on the screen to help you. That stopped his smiling instantly. He stiffened. "Why, you little bitch," he said. The colour faded from his lips. Suddenly I felt ice cold, as if something dangerous had slipped into the room. I looked towards the window and felt a tremor slide along my spine. "You listen to me," he said, his voice deadly calm. "The truth is, your sorry mother ran off and left you. The day she died, she'd come back to get her things, that's all. You can hate me all you want, but she's the one who left you." The room turned absolutely silent. He brushed at something on his shirt front, then walked to the door. After he left, I didn't move, except to trace the bars of light on the bed with my finger. The sound of his boots banging down the stairs drifted away, and I took the pillows from underneath the bedspread and placed them around me, like I was making an inner tube that might keep me afloat. I could understand her leaving him, but leaving me? This would sink me forever. The bee jar sat on the bedside table, empty now. Sometime since this morning the bees had finally gotten around to flying off. I reached over and took the jar in my hands, and out came the tears I'd been holding on to, seemed like for years. "Your sorry mother ran off and left you. The day she died, she'd come back to get her things, that's all. God and Jesus, make him take it back." The memory settled over me. The suitcase on the floor. The way they'd fought. My shoulders began to shake in a strange, uncontrollable way. I held the jar between my breasts, hoping it would steady me. But I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop crying. And it frightened me. As though I'd been struck by a car I hadn't seen coming and was lying on the side of the road, trying to understand what had happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying his words over and over. Each time there was a wrench in what it felt like my heart. I don't know how long I sat there feeling broken to pieces. Finally, I walked to the window and gazed out at the peach trees stretching halfway to North Carolina, the way they held their leafy arms in gestures of pure beseeching. Beseeching is a verb that means to plead with someone, to sort of throw your arms out in desperation to ask someone for something. The rest was sky and air and lonely space. I looked down at the bee jar, still clutched in my hand, and saw a teaspoon of teardrops floating in the bottom. I unfastened the window screen and poured it out. The wind lifted it on her skirt tails and shook it over the blistered grass. How could she have left me? I stood there several minutes, looking out on the world, trying to understand. Little birds were singing, so perfect. And that's when it came to me. What if my mother leaving wasn't true? What if T-Ray had made it up to punish me? I felt almost dizzy with relief. That was it. That had to be it. I mean, my father was Thomas Edison when it came to inventing punishments. Once after I backtalked him, he told me my rabbit, Mademoiselle, had died, and I had cried all night before I discovered her healthy as anything in her pen the next morning. He had to be making this up too. Some things were not possible in this world. Children did not have two parents who refused to love them. One, maybe, but for pity's sake, not two. It had to be like he said before. She was cleaning out the closet the day of the accident. People cleaned out closets all the time. I took a breath to steady myself. You could say that I'd never had a true religious moment, the kind where You know yourself, spoken to by a voice that seems other than yourself, spoken to so genuinely you see the words shining on trees and clouds. But I had such a moment right then, standing in my own ordinary room. I heard a voice say, "Lily Melissa Owens, your jar is open." In a matter of seconds, I knew exactly what I had to do. Leave. I had to get away from T-Ray, who was probably on his way back this minute to do Lord knows what to me. Not to mention, I had to get Rosaleen out of jail. The clock read 2:40. I needed a solid plan, but I didn't have the luxury of sitting down to think one up. I grabbed my pink canvas duffel bag, the one I planned to use for overnights the minute anyone asked me. I took the $38 I'd earned selling peaches, and I stuffed it into the bag with my 7 best pairs of pants, the ones that had the days of the week printed across the backside. I dumped in socks, 5 pairs of shorts, tops, a nightgown, shampoo, brush, toothpaste, toothbrush, rubber bands for my hair, all the time watching the window. What else? Catching sight of the map tacked to the wall, I snatched it down, not bothering to pry out the tacks. I reached under the mattress and pulled out my mother's picture, the gloves, and the wooden picture of Black Mary, and tucked them down into the bag too. Tearing a sheet of paper from last year's English notebook, I wrote a note, short and to the point. Dear T-Ray, don't bother looking for me. Lily. P.S. People who tell lies like you should rot in hell. When I checked the window, T-Ray was coming out of the orchard towards the house, fist balled, head ploughed forward, like a bull wanting to gore something. The verb to plough implies to move forward in a very fast, almost uncontrolled manner, so it's implying that Lily is moving with a real force, an almost violent force. I propped the note on my dresser and stood a moment in the centre of the room, wondering if I'd ever see it again. Goodbye, I said, and there was a tiny sprig of sadness pushing up from my heart. Outside, I spied the broken space in the latticework that wrapped around the foundation of the house. Squeezing through, I disappeared into the violet light and cobwebbed air. T-Ray's boots stomped across the porch. "Lily! Lily!" I heard his voice sailing along the floorboards of the house. All of a sudden, I caught sight of Snout, sniffing at the spot where I'd called through. I backed deeper into the darkness, but she'd caught my scent and started barking her mangy head off. T-Ray emerged with my note crumpled in his hand, yelling at Snout to shut the hell up, and tore out in his truck, leaving plumes of exhaust all along the driveway. Walking along the weedy strip beside the highway, for a second time that day, I was thinking how much older 14 had made me. In the space of a few hours, I'd become 40 years old. The road stretched empty as far as I could see, with heat shimmer making the air seem wavy in places. If I managed to get Rosaleen free, and if so big it could be planet Jupiter, just where did I think we'd go? Suddenly I stood still. Tiburon, South Carolina. Of course. The town written on the back of the Black Mary picture. Hadn't I been planning to go there one of these days? It made such perfect sense. My mother had been there. Or else she knew people there, who cared enough to send her a nice picture of Jesus' mother. And who would ever think to look for us there? I squatted beside the ditch and unfolded the map. Tiburon was a pencil dot beside the big red star of Columbia. T-Ray would check the bus station, so Rosaleen and I would have to hitchhike. How hard could that be? Stand there with your thumb out and a person takes pity on you. A short distance past the church, Brother Gerald whizzed by in his white Ford. I saw his brake lights flicker. He backed up. "I thought that was you," he said through the window. "Where are you headed?" "Town." "Again? What's the bag for?" I'm taking some things to Rosaleen. She's in jail." "Yeah, I know," he said, flinging open the passenger door. "Get in. I'm heading there myself." I'd never been in a preacher's car before. It's not that I expected a ton of Bibles stacked on the back seat, but I was surprised to see that inside it was like anyone else's car. "You're going to see Rosaleen?" I said. "The police called and asked me to press charges against her for stealing church property. They say she took some of our fans. You know anything about that?" It was only 2 fans. He jumped straight into his pulpit voice. "In the eyes of God, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 fans or 200. Stealing is stealing. She asked if she could take the fans. I said no, in plain English. She took 'em anyway. Now that's sin, Lily." Pious people have always got on my nerves. To be pious is to be deeply religious, very devoted to God. "But she's deaf in one ear," I said. "I think she just mixed up what you said. She's always doing that. T-Ray will tell her, from iron my 2 shirts, and she'll iron his blue shirts." "A hearing problem? I didn't know that," he said. "Rosaleen would never steal a thing." "They said she assaulted some men at the Esso station." "It wasn't like that," I said. "See, she was singing her favourite hymn, 'Where are you there when they crucified the Lord?' I don't believe those men were Christians, Brother Gerald, because they yelled at her to shut up with the blankety-blank Jesus tune. Rosaleen said, 'You can curse me, but don't blaspheme the Lord Jesus.' But they kept right on. So she poured the juice from her snuff cup on her shoes. Maybe she was wrong, but in her mind she was standing up for Jesus. I was sweating through my top and all along the backs of my thighs. Brother Gerald dragged his teeth back and forth across his lip. I could tell he was actually weighing up what I'd said. Mr. Gaston in the station alone, eating boiled peanuts at his desk, when Brother Gerald and I came through the door. Being the sort of person he was, Mr. Gaston had shells all over the floor. "Your coloured woman ain't here," he said, looking at me. "I took her to the hospital for stitches. She took a fall and hit her head." Took a fall my rear end. I wanted to throw his boiled peanuts against the wall. I could not stop myself from shouting at him. "What do you mean she fell and hit her head?" Mr. Gaston looked over at Brother Gerald, the all-knowing look men give each other when a female acts the least bit hysterical. "Settle down now," he said to me. "I can't settle down till I know she's all right," I said, my voice calmer, but still shaking a little. "She's fine. It's only a little concussion. I expect she'll be back here later this evening. The doctor wanted her watched a few hours." While Brother Gerald was explaining how he couldn't sign the warrant papers, seeing as how Rosaleen was nearly deaf, I started for the door. Mr. Gaston shot me a warning look. "We got a guard on her at the hospital, and he's not letting anybody see her. So you go on back home, you understand?" "Yes, sir, I'm going home." "You do that," he said, "because if I hear you've been anywhere near that hospital, I'm calling your daddy again." Sylvan Memorial Hospital was a low brick building with one wing for whites and another for blacks. I stepped into a deserted corridor, clogged with too many smells, carnations, old people, rubbing alcohol, bathroom deodorizer, and red jello. We're going to pause there for today, and you'll pick it up tomorrow. Thank you for listening and for following along with me. There's now a very short quiz on Microsoft Forms that we'd like you to go and complete straight after this. Have a lovely rest of your day.